Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to greet you all this snowy February Black History Month Sunday, but we are here in an amazing place for an amazing time, for an amazing purpose to honor, acknowledge, and get connected to our history. I'm Yolanda Jack, the Manager of Community Engagement here at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And as I have said many times, but it is always my pleasure to greet you on behalf of the Charles H. Wright Museum staff, board members, the president and CEO, Neil Barclay, all of my colleagues, and as well as the volunteers and members of the team who helped put this amazing event together. I'm here to bring you greetings on behalf of my colleagues and team members. And so I hope you feel greeted by all of us. And if you don't, you got to come back in here and greet us again personally. So we're going to make our way forward. I am here to welcome you all and to also acknowledge and to introduce the woman whose program, whose organization, whose department is putting this amazing event on. Rochelle Riley is the Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Detroit here in our own beloved city, but she was not born here. She was born in Tarboro, North Carolina, and raised in part by her grandparents, and that helped her get from where she was born there in NC. She went to NC at Chapel Hill, where she studied journalism and English, and she completed a Knight Wallace Fellowship in 2008 at our own University of Michigan. Her career has taken her all over the place. She has been on TV, NPR, has been on MSNBC, CNN, Fox 2. She has worked for the Washington Post, the Dallas Morning News, the Dallas Times Herald, the Louisville Courier Journal. And one of the things that I want to point out is because I met her while she was working here in the city of Detroit through Mosaic Youth Theater, where her daughter was a Mosaic young artist at. And so when she was in Dallas, she founded the Dallas-Fort Worth Urban Journalism workshop to train minority youth to be journalists. So even before her child was here, she was thinking about mentorship and connecting young people to opportunities to move them forward from where they are. Her works have really, she has a bibliography. If you have not read They That Live, shame on you. They That Live of African Americans Who Changed the World, published by Wayne State Press in 2021, was not her first book. The first book, The Burden, oh my goodness, published again by Wayne State Press in 2018. She is a writer. She is a thinker. She is a connector. She is a mentor. She is a mother, and then she is my friend. And I'm so happy to welcome her to our stage. Please help me welcome Rochelle Riley.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to need a wagon to get my head up here after that. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. As I tell people all the time, I am a writer by trade, warrior by necessity. When I wrote my column for the Free Press in, I guess in 2000, from 2000 to 2019, my favorite editor, Peter Badia, used to tell people, Rochelle will throw a grenade in a room. Because if it's something that's important for our city, where it has to do with our children, where it has to do with accountable government, all those things, I did that all that time. And when I got ready to leave the newsroom, I wanted to be an advocate for the greatest creative workforce in America. So I'm thrilled to be the Director of Arts and Culture. I named the Department of Arts, Culture, and Entrepreneurship. And there's a blue ampersand right there that you can't see. So you'll know that there is something there. And it's because art is business. Our artists are not doing something for a hobby. They work at it. And if we're talking about workforce development, we need to talk about the creative workforce as a part of that. But today, we're talking about history. And if we're talking about history, we're talking about the city's first ever city historian. I'm so glad I convinced the mayor to do it. It didn't take much convincing. Who is continuing to teach us about Detroit and its prominence for centuries. I mean, literally, we are one of the best cities in the world, and you know who doesn't know it? We don't. So we're going to do everything we can to change that. So when you Google Detroit and music, Detroit is defined as a major center in the United States for the creation and performance of music, and is best known for three developments: Motown, early punk rock, and techno. But there's more. The Metro Detroit area has a musical history spanning more than a century and a half, highlighted by the revival of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra in 1914. The DSO performed the first concert of its first subscription on December 19, 1887, at the Detroit Opera House. The Detroit Symphony resumed operations after being shut down in 1914 when 10 Detroit society women, that's what we were called back then, society women, contributed $100 each to the organization. They hired a music director who led the first performance of the orchestra on February 26 of 1914, again at the Opera House, and 5 years later, Orchestra Hall was constructed in just 4 months and 23 days and became one of the most prominent orchestras in the country, performing with the leading artists of the day. And in 1922, the orchestra gave the world's first radio broadcast of a symphony orchestra. So all of that is a part of that history. But come the 20s until now, Detroit musical history became as eclectic and diverse, and yes, diverse is still a beautiful word, diverse music. What you will learn today from Detroit's first ever official city historian, I just like saying that, Jamon, is that Detroit has been at the forefront of every musical style that exists, and that Detroiters have been the stars in all of them. And the influence of Black Americans on American music and Detroit music has been profound. You'll hear the major genres represented in Detroit's music include not just classical, blues, jazz, gospel, R&B, rock, pop, punk, soul, electronic, hip-hop. Greater Detroit area has been the birthplace and a primary venue for numerous platinum-selling artists. So I hope you take away two things today. One, the excellence that put Detroit at the forefront of all music is because of the diversity of our population, which includes European, Middle Eastern, Latino, Asian, Mexican, African descent, and that no discussion of workforce and development in Detroit or Michigan should ever be held without including the creative workforce development and support. We've been producing the best music and growing the best artists for more than a century. Now we need to stop growing them so they can take their excellence elsewhere and support them so they stay in Detroit. Thank you. We want every child who is a filmmaker, dancer, musician, or stage star, or behind the stage, to know that they can learn to be great here and stay great here and nurture a part of our creative economy right here so that future Stevie Wonders, Martha Reeves, Jay Dillas, Aretha Franklin, Smokey Robinsons, Jessica Care Moores, Diane Carrolls, and Miss Carroll, by the way, if you remember, was the first Black woman to win a Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical. It was a role she originated right at the Fisher Theater, no strings. I'd like to thank the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for co-hosting us today for the third annual Black History Month lecture by Jamon Jordan in the beautifully renovated General Motors Theater. Wait till you hear the music with these acoustics. I want to thank my boss, Crystal Perkins, director of the city's General Services Department. She's right on the front row. She oversees more than 200 beautiful parks, a dozen rec centers, the arts and culture and history initiatives that she lets me do, and the city's fleet of vehicles. Yes, that's a hardworking sister. I also want to thank our project lead, Lacey Holmes. You'll meet her at the end, but Lacey came to work for me because I was at a conference where she said she's been working in theater and retail and doing all this stuff and was not getting ahead and wanted to really learn more and grow more and be more. And I said, great, come and work for me. So I hired her. So now she works for the city of Detroit. And I also want to thank our ACE partners from the Department of Neighborhoods, Kim Tandy, who's here with her mom, Eva Torres, who's always there when I need her, and Kristen Richardson from the ACE team, who handles all ACE graphics, and the comms department, headed by Vicki Thomas, another former journalist who never stops being a journalist. We will be live streaming today's event and recording it so we can show it to you again and again all month, and as far as I'm concerned, all year, because Black history is a year-round sport. I'd like to recognize any elected officials who are here, and you just have to yell out because of the lights. That's fine, because we'll record it and send it to them. And I'm using somebody else's iPad. I'm trying to get to these bios, which I should know by heart. And that's not working, so I will just tell you. Jamon Jordan is an amazing college professor, historian, and tour guide who, through the Black Scroll Network, does hundreds of tours where he is teaching people about the magnificent history that Detroit has. We were the arsenal of democracy. We were the beginnings of the Black middle class. We were the Underground Railroad. There's so much. Alvin Waddles is one of the best pianists in America, actually in the world. He's a Detroit Ace honoree. He is the director of music for several places. Go to different churches and you can hear him all over the place. But he is here with a special surprise, his son Dominic, who is going to join us to perform. And yes. And while Jamon's lectures are fabulous on their own, if we're talking about music, we wanted to give you music. So I would now like to make sure that you enjoy them. So let's keep leading and supporting our creative workforce and grow our creative economy, which is worth millions, no billions of dollars. But to make it easier for you to imagine that and to embrace that concept, let's let Jamon Jordan and Alvin Waddles teach you a little history today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. What up, though? All right, we in Detroit. Welcome, everybody, to More Than Motown, Detroit's impact on music. I want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for allowing me to be here on this Sunday to tell this important story. I want to thank the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for hosting this event and for continuing the work of teaching and celebrating Black history in a climate where Black history is under attack. I want to thank Rochelle Riley, the Director of Arts, Culture, and Entrepreneurship, Lacey Holmes, the whole ACE team for making this all come together. And let's all thank the great Alvin Waddles and his son Dominic for being here to play for us. Give it up for them. And thank you all for coming out today in this snow. I know some people were turned away. They were ready to come, and they saw that snow, and so now they're probably watching it, live streaming it. But I'm glad you all came out in person on the second day of Black History Month when there's many other events you could have attended. Thank you. I do want to take a moment now to think about and remember two people. The first is Dr. Ben Wilson, who was my professor, my elder advisor, and my friend at Western Michigan University. He created a mini-fest at WMU where musicians and bands played music while the scholars discussed the history and impact of that music. This is a smaller version of what he did at Western. He passed away in November of last year. So I want to say ashe to him. And then the other person is James DeWitt Yancey, Jay Dilla, one of the greatest hip hop producers ever, who came from right here in the city of Detroit, in Conant Gardens. His birthday, also known as Dilla Day, is February 7th, so it's coming up. To give it up for him, ashe. Now, even though I'm about to get into this music, I do want to really piggyback on something that Rochelle said. Music is business. And so I'm not going to be talking all that much about business, but I do want to start just giving you a highlight of how music is business and how Detroit has shown that music is business. The old Detroit Opera House, which was at the Campus Martius, was the old one, which Rochelle talked about. When Osip Gabrielowicz came to the city of Detroit doing a tour of classical music where he was a conductor, and he conducted right here in the city of Detroit, the board of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra said, hey, we want to hire you. And he's like, you're not hiring me to play in that old opera house because the acoustics were bad. So they built another one in less than 5 months to bring him in. And he, of course, became the first in the new Detroit Symphony Orchestra Hall. But if you know anything about classical music, and Detroit has been a center of classical music, particularly at Orchestra Hall, but in other venues as well. If you know anything about classical music, you know that they don't sell tickets like Beyonce, all right? So it's not a line around the corner of people buying tickets to classical or opera in most cases. Now, if you're in New York, yes. But in many places, they don't make that kind of money. They exist because donors donate. And a lot of wealthy people like classical music, so they donate to it. But during the Great Depression, they stopped donating. And so the Orchestra Hall shut down. The city was going to foreclose on the building and tear it down because it was the Great Depression. a group of black millionaires got together and said, oh, don't tear it down, we want it. We got money. Yeah, I know the banks failed, but our money wasn't in banks. Our money was in numbers. And so it became the Paradise Theater from 1941 to 1951. That's how you can go today to Detroit Symphony Orchestra Hall. It wasn't torn down in the early 1940s because these wealthy black men who were in charge of numbers took over it for 10 years. That's how my daughter went there for Civic Youth Ensemble, and she was a violinist in the Civic Youth Ensemble. And I see Dominic with his Civic Youth Ensemble case for his saxophone. So that's just a little aside, that music is business. Sometimes above ground business, sometimes underground business. Now today in Detroit, the major forms of music that are still being recorded in Detroit, and all kinds of music has been recorded and still is, but the major form is hip hop and techno. Now it might be T Grizzly or Sada Baby or Big Sean or Cash Doll or Dej Loaf, but before we had them, we had Awesome Dre, Chaos and Maestro, Nikki D, Slum Village, Blade Icewood, Proof, The Drunken Master, Lola Damone, Merciless Amir, Prince Vince, Jerry Flindale and his Def Sound Studios, which was the first hip-hop studio recording hip-hop music right here in the city of Detroit, and DJ House Shoes. Today, you may go to Spotlight or Charivari, or the Movement Festival to party with techno music, but we had the Music Institute at 1315 Broadway, and we have Submerged Records, the Techno Museum on East Grand Boulevard. But where did the Detroit's hip-hop and techno come from? Let's hear where today's Detroit music came from.
Ready, 1, 2, 3, 4.
When the sun comes down, they hit the streets. In the bars, they try to meet some other stranger. Ease the pain of living alone till it drives them insane. The woodwork squeaks, and out come the freaks. Yeah, the woodwork squeaks, and out come the freaks.
Woodwork squeaks, and out come the freaks.
So many of us, if you live to the music of Detroit, so many of us who grew up in the 80s remember these two Detroit jams. These songs tell us the birth of two types of music, Detroit techno and Detroit hip hop. The first song was Clear by Cybertron. It was released in 1983. Cybertron was formed by Magic Wine Atkins and Richard 3070 Davis. Richard Davis was born in Detroit and began producing electronic music while he was in college. He went on to get involved in rock music. But Wine Atkins was born in Detroit. He eventually moved to Belleville, Michigan, where he met Derek May, Mayday, and Kevin Master Reese Saunderson. They have gone down in history as the Belleville Three and are the founders of Detroit Techno. But where did that music come from? What was the major influence on the Belleville Three's creation of techno? We're gonna hold on for that question. The other song we heard was Out Come the Freaks by Was Not Was, but that rap was done by Carl Butch Small. That's who that is rapping. It is the first rap ever put out by a Detroit artist. Butch Small would go on to become a music producer, a percussionist, a bass player for many artists, including Snoop Dogg, as well as a teacher of his own son, Carlos Small, better known as DJ Los. Both Was Not Was and the Belleville Three, both of them say their influence, their main influence, was funk, especially P-Funk. Now you may know that P-Funk is the music created by Parliament Funkadelic, the music collective founded and led by a barbershop shop owner in Plainfield, New Jersey, named George Clinton. Give it up for George. He's coming here later this year. He's recorded, not here, but Detroit. He recorded his first hit song, I Want to Testify, in 1967, right here in Detroit. His bandmates were in New Jersey at the time. They couldn't get here. So who were the musicians on the record? Clinton was a producer and songwriter on the staff at Motown Records. That's where he found the musicians to play on the record by the Parliaments. Clinton would change the Parliaments from a doo-wop wannabe Temptations group into a psychedelic funk band during a 10-day stint at Phelps Lounge in May of 1968. They started out in the beginning of the 10-day stint doing doo-wop, sing and dance. But by the 7th day, Clinton and other members had washed the conch out of their hair, came out with baby diaper on, and P-Funk was born. So it's in Detroit that Parliament records Flashlight. It's in Detroit that Funkadelic records One Nation Under a Groove. It's in Detroit that P-Funk makes Not Just Knee Deep. She was only knee deep when she did The Freak with Me. It's in Detroit that Clinton records Atomic Dog. And it's in Detroit where Bootsy's band members from Cincinnati, Roger and Larry Troutman, formed Zapp, and they record More Bounce to the Ounce. And that music, funk made in Detroit, is the inspiration for Detroit techno and the earliest Detroit hip hop. You don't get Detroit techno or Detroit hip hop without P-Funk. And you don't get P-Funk without Motown Records. Clinton worked at Motown. He had Motown musicians, the Funk Brothers, playing on many of his records. Let's listen to the Motown sound, the music of young America, that Detroit iconic music, especially of the 1960s. back once more. I wish those days, yeah, had to go. Give it up for Mr. Alvin Waddle. Woo! But how do we get Motown Records? In 1860, there were about 13,000 people living in Stewart County, Georgia. About 6,000, nearly half of the population, was enslaved. James Thomas, J.T. Gordy, was a white slave owner in Stewart County. He was also a Confederate soldier during the Civil War. He was also a well-known member of the local Baptist church. One of the enslaved black girls on his cotton plantation was Esther Johnson. You should know that enslaved women did not have the power to refuse the sexual assaults of slave owners. J.T. Gordy impregnated Esther Johnson. She was 13 years old. J.T. Gordy was also married, and so his white wife was named Harriet Gordy. With his wife, he had 4 children, one of whom was Jim Jack Gordy. Jim Jack Gordy was a staunch segregationist, and he had a daughter. His daughter's name was Lillian Gordy. Lillian Gordy married James Earl Carter Sr. They had 4 children. The oldest one was named James Earl Carter Jr. You know him as President Jimmy Carter. But what about Esther Johnson, the enslaved woman and her child by Lillian's grandfather, J.T. Gordy? Well, that child's name was Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy had a son. His name was Berry Gordy II, but you know him as Pops Gordy. By 1950, most Americans had moved out of Stewart County, many of them coming north as part of the Great Migration. Pops Gordy and his wife, Bertha Fuller Gordy, left Georgia for Detroit in 1922. They had 8 children, 4 girls and 4 boys. One of the children is named Berry Gordy III, but you know him as Berry Gordy Jr. The founder of Motown Records and the 39th president of the United States were second cousins. Located on John R. and Canfield, the Flame Show Bar was the hottest club in Detroit in the 1950s. The photo concession was owned by 2 sisters, Anna and Gwen Gordy. You know when you go to the club, you got to take a picture. And so in those days, if I was with my wife, I would take the picture like this. And then they give it to us, it opens up in a little booklet like that. We put it on the mantle, and we remember when we was at the club. Remember we was at the club. Look at your shoes. Look at my suit. Even if I went by myself, I still have to take a picture. It just would be different. But Anna and Gwen had a little brother who owned a record store, Berry Gordy Jr. Berry and Gwen began writing songs, 5 hits for Detroit soul legend Jackie Wilson, including Reet Petite in 1957 and To Be Loved in 1958. Remember Prince Akeem of Zamunda singing To Be Loved in the middle of the street and Coming to America? And then Lonely Teardrops. Anna and Gwen started their own record company, Anna Records, which would be the precursor to Berry Gordy's company, Motown Records. We know all of the stars at Motown: Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Marvin Gaye, the Supremes, Martha and the Vandellas, the Temptations, the Four Tops, the Marvelettes, Stevie Wonder, and of course, the Jackson 5. But you don't get Motown Records. You don't get any of those artists performing and becoming iconic musicians without the Flame Show Bar. And you don't get Motown Records without the great black women that were there, including Anna and Gwen Gordy. But you also don't get it without jazz. Jazz is, as we were talking about classical music earlier, jazz is just as classical as that classical. And those first musicians at Motown, the Funk Brothers and others, were all jazz musicians. Joe Hunter and Earl Van Dyke on keys, Robert White, Chank Willis, and Joe Messina on guitar, Benny Benjamin and Pistol Allen on drums, Jack Ashford on tambourines and vibes, Bongo Brown on percussion, Hank Cosby and Mike Terry on saxophone, Beans Bowles on flute, George Bohannon and Paul Reiser on trombone, and the greatest bass player of all time, James Jamerson on bass. They were all bebop musicians and big band musicians, or they were trained and taught by bebop and big band musicians. Maurice King, who led the house band at the Flame Show Bar, was a big band swing jazz musician. When the Flame Show Bar closed in 1963, Maurice King became the music director at Motown Records. Motown was built on jazz music. And where did those jazz musicians play? The Flame Show Bar, the Paradise Theater, the Minor Key, Baker's Keyboard Lounge, and the Bluebird Inn. And the Bluebird Inn had in their band at one time a musician I'm sure you've heard of named Miles Davis. Let's listen to the music of Miles Davis. Give it up for Alvin and Dominic. Detroit gave the world the music of Roy Brooks. We gave them Betty Carter. We gave them Terry Pollard. We gave them Paul Chambers. We gave them Dorothy Ashby. We gave them Milt Jackson. We gave them Tribe Records, Harold McKinney, Phil Randall, and Doug Hammond, Wendell Harrison. We gave them Strata, Kenny Cox, Burt Myrick, Lyman Woodard. We gave the world Barry Harris. We gave the world Marcus Belgrave. We gave the world the Kresge Eminent Artist of 2025, Marion Hayden. But where does Detroit modern jazz come from? Before we had bebop, before modern jazz, we had big band, swing. Let's take the A Train by Duke Ellington. This is the music at the beginning of the Great Migration. That great migration of African Americans from the South to Detroit. Big band was the pop music from the 1920s to the 1940s. It was being played at the Paradise Theater, at the 606 Horseshoe Lounge, at the Club 36s, at the Club Plantation, at the Club Congo, at the Club Sudan, Paradise Valley. There's no Motown records. There's no rhythm and blues. There's no Jackie Wilson. There's no bebop in Detroit without Paradise Valley. Paradise Valley was the black business and entertainment district that sprung up during the Great Migration that was located originally between Gratiot and East Vernon Highway and between John R. and Hastings, the area that is now home to Ford Field, where the Detroit Lions play football, Comerica Park, where the Detroit Tigers play baseball, 36th District Court, where I got to go and pay a ticket, and I-75 and I-375, which destroyed Hastings Street, the main street of Black Bottom, Paradise Valley, and the center of black businesses from the 1920s to the 1950s. Hastings Street was the home of Joe's Record Shop, owned by Joe Von Battle, who recorded blues musicians like Memphis Slim and the legendary John Lee Hooker. Let's listen to this song by John Lee Hooker.
Shoot you right down at all your feet. Take you home with me. Put you in my house. Boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love to see you walk up and down the floor when you're talking to me. That baby talk. I like it like that. When you talk like that, you knock me dead. Right on my feet. How.
This is another important Detroit blues singer from Hastings Street, Alberta Adams.
Chicago, Memphis, LA, and New York. They love me in Georgia, New Orleans, of course. No matter how far I roam, Detroit is my home.
All right. The Boom Boom by John Lee Hooker was inspired when he was performing at the Apex Bar, and give it up for Bryce Detroit for all the work he's doing in the North End, including for the Apex Bar. Now, on Hastings Street in Willis, there was a church, New Bethel Baptist Church. The pastor was Reverend Clarence LaVaughn Franklin. Maybe you know him as C.L. Franklin. And if you don't know him, I'm sure you know his daughter, the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. The sermons of C.L. Franklin, as well as the early church singing of Aretha, were recorded by Joe Von Battle, the owner of Joe's Records, at 3530 Hastings Street, right across Hastings from the Brewsters. You don't get the Queen of Soul without Hastings Street. Also on and near Hastings Street, you get two other important churches. Greater Love Tabernacle Church of God in Christ on Hastings and Medbury. The music minister was a woman named Mattie Moss. She would eventually get married and become Mattie Moss Clark. She had 4 daughters, Niecy, Twinkie, Dorinda, and Karen, the Clark sisters. Another church near Hastings was on Mack and St. Alban. It's called Zion Congregational Church of God in Christ. But maybe you know it as Mack Avenue Church of God in Christ, founded in 1919 by Elder Isaiah Winans. Elder Winans' grandson was named David Winans. You may know him as Pop Winans. And he and his wife had some sons, Marvin, Carvin, Michael, and Ronald, the Winans, and BB and CC. Chicago likes to take the credit for gospel music, but without Detroit, gospel music just ain't the same. Let's play it.
Question is, will I ever leave you? The answer is no, 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 no. Question is, will I ever leave you? The answer is no.
All of this, blues, big band, and gospel is coming from Hastings Street. And Hastings Street is the vein of Paradise Valley. But where does Paradise Valley, the Black Business and Entertainment District, come from? There's no Paradise Valley without Black Bottom. Black Bottom, acre for acre, is the most historically significant, culturally rich area in the history of the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. The indigenous people were there first. The French came into Black Bottom. The British were in Black Bottom. Germans, Irish, Polish, Italian, and Greek immigrants were in Black Bottom. And black people were in Black Bottom. By the 1800s, the Underground Railroad leaders in Detroit were black men and women who were living in the Black Bottom neighborhood. These Black Bottom black leaders will be the founders of the 3 earliest black churches in the city of Detroit. Second Baptist Church, the oldest black church in the state of Michigan, the first school for black people in Detroit, founded in 1836 by leaders who had led an uprising to free Thornton and Lucy Blackburn from slave catchers. It's located today in Greektown, which at that time was a part of Black Bottom. Bethel AME, the oldest black Methodist congregation in Detroit, founded in 1839, originally located in and near Black Bottom, but now it's located down the street from us where we're standing right now. It's on St. Antoine and Warren. It's also the church of the Gordy family. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, the oldest black Episcopalian congregation in the state of Michigan, founded in 1846 on the corner of St. Antoine and Congress. That's Black Bottom. If you don't know where that is, it's about 100 yards south of Blue Cross Blue Shield headquarters. And if you don't know where that is, it's about 100 yards south of Floods. Different audiences. All of these churches served as stations on the Underground Railroad. And the reason we had gospel and blues music is because of the spirituals, the songs created by our enslaved ancestors, many of them with messages of freedom interlaced in the lyrics. And we're going to hear one of the strongest of those spirituals right now by Alvin Waddles. You don't get gospel and blues without the spirituals. You don't get techno and hip hop in Detroit without Motown. You don't get Motown without the Flame Show Bar. You don't get the Flame Show Bar in the Gotham Hotel in the Sugar Hill neighborhood without Big Band in Paradise Valley. You don't get Paradise Valley and Hastings Street without Black Bottom. And you don't get Black Bottom without the Underground Railroad. The fight for freedom is at the heart of our story, in business, in education, in politics, in religion, and music. So we cannot let anyone, not the states of Florida or Texas, not the states of Tennessee or South Carolina, not the President of the United States, tell us that we cannot learn about and teach our history. Because this ain't Texas. This is Detroit. Thank you. And let's let Alvin take us out.
Oh my God. Thank you to Alvin Waddles. Thank you to my friend and to our first official city historian, Jamon Jordan. Whew. Our problem is not that we haven't always been great, it's that we haven't always told the story. I was born, B-O-R-N, in Tarboro, North Carolina, this little town of 10,000 people. There were 10,000 people there when I grew up. There are 10,000 people there now. But I was born, B-O-R-N-E, in Detroit. And when I arrived here in 2000, so it's almost a quarter of a century now, my job, whether it's as a columnist, as an arts advocate, as a mentor to 22 young women in honor of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, is to make sure that people know how great Detroit has always been. We help save the world. We are at the forefront of everything that has ever happened, whether it's politics, industry, or music. So I want to thank Jamon for that. I want you to know that we're recording this, and when that recording is ready, I need for all of you to send it to everybody you ever met. Thank you. And for folks who are watching on live stream, thank you so much for tuning in. But I don't know if you had as much fun as we did here. So I want to thank those of you who braved the snow to come out and know that we will be doing lots more of this, because our job is to make sure people know that Detroit is one of the best places in the world. That's right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Because of the cold, we have coffee and cookies in the Latimer Cafe for you, and please stay and say hi and hear about what we're doing. And if you go to DetroitArtsAndCulture.com, you can see the different things that my office is doing and has done with just a couple of people on the ACE staff, and then 2 on the Detroit Arts Alleys that we're doing around the city, transforming, dilapidated old alleys into these beautiful art spaces. And we also are going to be hosting a performing arts summit next month in March for dance, theater, film, and music, so that we can look at the landscape of all that we are, all that we've been, and what it takes to support where we need to go. So any child in Detroit who wants to work in any of those genres can do it. Thank you. Oh, wait. Everybody sit down just a minute. I have to thank the best technical team I've ever worked with, Dan Morency and Tim Marouche. And I also have to thank my friend Charles Henry from the City of Detroit's Media Services team, who is live streaming this and recording it for us. Thank you.
It was awesome, magnificent. Yes, everybody should see this.
And much more than music.
Yeah, it was
We
absolutely.
need more of this.
Yes.
Our kids need all of this.
Right. It was great. It was incredible. Oh my God. You got to look at my t-shirt too. This is absolutely amazing. Wonderful.